All right, so be careful what you say. All right, so you want to tell us what we're going to do here?
Okay. I just wanted to, I have a very sad announcement. I don't know if any of you have heard, but on Tuesday, Brian House, who was the impetus behind the Massachusetts Estuary Project, he passed away.
Oh,
So yeah, we're shocked. The lab is shocked. No one was really expecting it. I will send more details through Water Alliance when I get them, or if anyone's interested in the service or attending. But yeah, that's shook us up, but will go on. So, and
yeah.
do you want to just do the presentation for the today we're going to do a presentation that is actually pre-recorded from DEP. It's about a half an hour long. Some of you might have seen it. I know Omar has seen it. And then we can go from there. It's the Title V regs, the proposed Title V regs. Yep. And Richard thought it would be a good idea. We would just go over it, just watch it. It's about a half an hour. And then we can discuss it from there. The comment period has been extended till January. There are going to be 2 more public hearings that you can tune into by Zoom and have your comments heard. And those will be in late January. I can send those out too. That's part of what Omar was kind enough to send me, that I send everybody the link. So yeah, so we just thought, there's been some pushback, and I think our voices need to be heard. So we ready?
Yeah.
I will share my screen.
If anybody has questions during the presentation, just write them down. We'll talk about them afterwards.
Right.
Okay. Could I quickly ask beforehand, and terrible news about Brian, is it possible for us to independently hear or pass on a URL or some other access to this presentation to other people?
Definitely. It is. Right. It was kind of, that's why I suggested to Richard that we actually do this presentation, just the half an hour presentation. It's a lot longer because there's a question and answer session, but it was kind of buried in the down below and everything else. So I thought it would be nice that if we all listen to it together, but definitely I'll send you the direct link to their presentation.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Let me make sure. You're not going to be watching my emails. I'm sorry. Nobody wants that. It should be up, but it's not showing. See, I told you this. We practiced this and it didn't work. So yeah, it really wants to show you my emails. If anyone wants to answer them all, that'd be great. Okay, here we go. Now you should see something that says the proposed draft regulations.
Yep.
We did. Yep.
Okay. So here is the presentation. Go, please. Oh, of course. Ay, 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 ay.
It's in there.
I'm sorry, that was the one that started. That was the end.
Same thing.
Can you hear that? I've gotten a couple people saying they can't.
No, can't hear it.
Can't hear anything.
No audio.
No
Okay.
audio. Yeah.
Anybody have any, let me stop her. Let me see.
Why don't you try to do the whole thing again?
Oh, hold on. I think there's a button here that says share sound.
Huh.
Yeah, sorry. We didn't try that button. Let me. Sorry, I also have a mouse issue.
You get my email about that yesterday?
No. Did you send me an email?
Yeah, I did.
What? Let me just put myself on mute.
Me too. Okay, I think this will fix it. The frozen mouse again. Okay,
Maximum daily load.
can you hear her
The
now?
total maximum
Yes.
daily load, or TMDL, is approved by EPA and establishes a target amount of a pollutant that a water body can accept and still maintain its designated use. This is not just an environmental problem. It is also an economic problem. Because this problem causes a decline in fishing, it causes closures of shellfish beds, It causes a loss of recreational opportunities. And for these areas, that can mean a loss of tourism. This ultimately leads to a loss of business for these areas and a decrease in real estate values. And unaddressed, this problem will only become worse. This is not a new problem. In 2001, the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, or MEP, began assessing the estuaries and embayments along our coastline. Through 2001 to 2015, 89 watersheds were examined. By 2015, the MEP work had noted that coastal embayments were being impacted by nitrogen, and septic systems were contributing to this nitrogen load. Also in 2015, the Cape Cod 208 plan to address water quality on Cape Cod was approved by EPA and certified by Governor Baker. And separately, but in the same year, DEP under Executive Order 562 was tasked with reviewing all of its regulations and received numerous comments pertaining to Title V. DEP formed a stakeholder group to address these comments, one of which was a comment concerning the nitrogen-sensitive areas provisions of Title V and how these areas could be redefined to address this nitrogen loading problem that was being shown in our embayments. And in 2020, DEP formed the NSA subcommittee to discuss this specific issue. That NSA subcommittee met 3 times from September 2020 to most recently this past June to discuss potential changes to the nitrogen-sensitive area provisions of Title V. They looked at expanding the definition of nitrogen-sensitive areas, defining how these areas would be determined, what new nitrogen requirements would apply to these areas, what compliance options would be available, and how an implementation schedule would look. I'm not trying to make you squint with this slide. If you'd like to see it in greater detail, you can go to mass.gov and type in MEP, and you will go to our webpage for the Massachusetts Estuaries Project. But this map I'm using to show you the cities and towns that will be affected by this regulatory revision: Cape Cod, the islands, and southeastern, south coastal Massachusetts. In June of 2022, prior to putting forth draft regulations, DEP began an outreach campaign for these towns and cities that would be affected by these changes. On June 1st, Commissioner Suberg issued a letter to all of these cities and towns explaining what the proposed framework would be. And then our summer tour commenced. Our DEP staff from our Southeast Regional Office in Lakeville and also from our Boston office met with 32 cities and towns and interested groups, such as the Cape Cod Commission, the Buzzards Bay Action Committee, Realtors Associations, Health Agent Associations, the Cape Managers Associations, EPA, and legislators. And we also began development of our webpage. The Title V regulation webpage on mass.gov has a lot of information already populated, and we will continue to add to it. And as Tim mentioned, the recording of this information session will also be posted there. So let's take a look at the details of these changes. Currently, Title V defines nitrogen-sensitive areas, or NSAs, for drinking water protection purposes. These are Zone 2's, interim wellhead protection areas, and areas with both on-site septic systems and non-public drinking water supply wells. And for these, we impose a loading restriction of 440 gallons per day per acre. These provisions will be maintained in Title V. There will be no changes. What we are proposing is to establish a new designation of NSA that we're calling a Natural Resource Area NSA. There are 2 categories, 2 groups for this new Natural Resource Area NSA. The first is any watershed to an embayment or sub-embayment that is the subject of a nitrogen total maximum daily load approved by the US EPA pursuant to the Federal Clean Water Act and an area-wide water quality management plan pursuant to Section 208 of the Clean Water Act addressing nitrogen pollution. What this is referring to is the Cape Cod communities. All Cape Cod communities are subject to the 208 plan approved by EPA in 2015. There are currently 30 watersheds across Cape Cod that have EPA-approved nitrogen TMDLs. This map, which is also available on our website, shows the Cape area that we're talking about in this darker green shade. The second group of natural resource area NSAs are any watershed to an embayment or sub-embayment that is the subject of an EPA-approved TMDL or is determined to be nitrogen sensitive by Mass DEP based on a scientific evaluation adopted through a public process involving public notice that includes a scientific and regulatory rationale for the designation and affording a 60-day public comment period. So going back to this map, part of this second group are in the lighter green shade and the teal color. The lighter green shade being those communities that have, a total nitrogen TMDL, and the teal colored ones have an accepted MEP report, but don't have the TMDL developed yet. And then there are others that aren't shaded yet because they haven't completed or even maybe begun a scientific evaluation. So what does it mean when this area is designated? Well, for septic systems serving both new construction and for existing facilities that are in a natural resource area, NSA, those systems must incorporate best available nitrogen reducing technology within 5 years of the effective date of that NSA designation. Or the community can apply for, obtain, and operate under a watershed permit. The draft regulations define best available nitrogen reducing technology as an alternative system certified by Mass DEP for general use pursuant to Title V, which has the lowest effluent total nitrogen performance value. An alternative system that is granted provisional or pilot approval by Mass DEP may also be utilized as long as that system has a total nitrogen performance value less than or equal to the lowest system for certified for general use. So what's the timing for implementing this requirement? For the first group, the 30 watersheds on Cape Cod that have a nitrogen TMDL and are operating under the Cape Cod 208 plan, the NSA designation is automatic and effective the date these regulations are promulgated. For the second group, those that may have a TMDL or may have an accepted scientific evaluation, or they may be just starting that evaluation or working to complete an evaluation, those would go through an individual public process and DEP will designate that area at a later date after the regulations are promulgated. The exemption from the requirement for the individual owner to have to install enhanced treatment is if the community obtains a watershed permit that covers an area that would be subject to this new NSA regulation. A community can apply directly for a watershed permit, or if they are not yet ready to do so, but intend to do so, the community can submit a notice of intent within 18 months of being designated as a natural resource area NSA. Submitting the notice of intent will pause or toll that 5-year installation requirement. So this chart is to help depict those two different groups and the pathway and how Title V and the watershed permit work together. On the top tier, we have the 30 watersheds on the Cape that are automatically designated when the regs are promulgated. This starts the 5-year time clock for the individual system owner to upgrade unless the community either submits a notice of intent within 18 months of the reg promulgation to say that they intend to pursue a watershed permit, or if the community is ready to do so, they can apply directly for the watershed permit. Similarly, but at a later time, the bottom group, the second group of natural resource area NSA, these will be designated by DEP through a public process. Upon that completion of that public process, the 5-year time clock would start for that watershed and those individual systems in that watershed, unless again, the community chose to apply for a notice of intent, submit a notice of intent, saying they will pursue the watershed permit or to directly apply for the watershed permit. So in addition to these draft revisions to Title V, DEP is proposing regulations for watershed permits. Briefly, a watershed permit is a 20-year voluntary permit instead of our traditional 5-year permit. It's issued to a local government unit, a regional local government unit. It can be issued to multiple local government units that have intermunicipal agreements. It provides communities the opportunity to employ a greater range of solutions to address water quality needs and utilize alternative and innovative approaches. It utilizes an adaptive management strategy that allows communities to test out a technology, monitor and evaluate it, and review the results, and then adapt as needed in order to address the water quality impairments. The watershed permit is based on a town-approved watershed management plan. The watershed management plan is the long-term plan to address an existing water quality impairment to restore and protect that water quality. It can be based on a comprehensive or a targeted watershed management plan. For watersheds with the TMDL, this plan must be designed to achieve compliance with the water quality standards for the TMDL and demonstrate at least 75% pollutant reduction within that 20-year time frame. There is an allowance in the regulation that DEP may determine an alternative schedule is appropriate based on issues specific to the watershed. The watershed permit will follow a public notice, public comment issuance process similar to most DEP permits. It will be published in the MIPA Environmental Monitor. It will be circulated at a newspaper in the area affected by the watershed permit and also posted on DEP's webpage. It will afford a comment period of at least 60 days, and a public hearing can be held if requested by the permittee or deemed necessary by DEP. The modification, suspension, revocation, and termination of a watershed permit will also follow a public notice process. There would be some minor modifications that would be allowed to go through without a public comment process. But for revocation and termination, if a permit was revoked by DEP or the permittee terminated their coverage under a watershed permit, this would follow the same public notice and comment process as the issuance process. And that's because upon termination or revocation, the requirement for the individual system owner to install best available nitrogen reducing technology then again applies. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tim Jones, who's going to compare the two different tracks of the Title V IA installation and the watershed permit.
Great, thank you, Mary Beth. Okay, now we have a general understanding of the two different approaches being put forward by DEP. A good way to better understand them a little bit more deeply is to compare and contrast them. So we'll do that using this table here. In the first row, we see with the Title V upgrade requirement that it's mandatory and must be done within 5 years of designation unless, and now we move to the right-hand column, a community obtains a watershed permit or files a notice of intent within 18 months of the nitrogen sensitive area designation to obtain that permit. And the permit is it involves implementation of a comprehensive plan focused on reducing nitrogen to meet specific water quality targets and goals for that watershed. The implementation period is 5 years for the mandatory upgrade and 20 years for the watershed permit. For the mandatory upgrade, it would be the individual septic system owner who would pay, and for the watershed permit, it would be the community that would have to pay. Type of participation is mandatory unless, as I mentioned previously, the community obtains a watershed permit. And the watershed permit is a voluntary choice by the community to enter into that permit. But once entered, the terms and conditions must be complied with. Funding sources. There is a funding source for septic system upgrades. It's called the Community Septic Management Loan Program. And more information about that can be found on the DEP website under the Title V section. There are more funding sources for the watershed permitting approach, and those information about those funding sources can also be found on the DEP website. Effectiveness at reducing nitrogen to achieve target levels. The mandatory upgrade requirement might not be sufficient to meet water quality goals, and that might leave the watershed nitrogen impacts insufficiently addressed, which could require further action in the future by that community in that watershed to bring those nitrogen loads down to where they need to be. In contrast, the watershed permitting regulations would allow the use of various ways to reduce nitrogen in the watershed. It involves a quantitative approach to efficiently estimate the nitrogen that needs to be reduced to meet water quality goals. Moving to the next slide. The first row, we see the categories feasibility. And in the first column, with the nitrogen sensitive area Title V upgrade requirement, there are concerns with feasibility of that approach. Concerns with cost, shortage of supplies, shortage of contractors, and the 5-year implementation period. In contrast, the watershed permitting regulations would allow for more time, would allow for a wider distribution of costs, the use of adaptive management to increase feasibility and flexibility, and it allows the use of non-conventional methods to reduce nitrogen within the watershed. Moving down, in terms of flexibility, the upgrade requirement is not flexible. It requires the use of IA technology, and it has a short time frame. In contrast, the watershed permitting approach is flexible, and a community can tailor its approach to its needs and its interests, and it allows for multiple solutions to be implemented to reduce nitrogen in the watershed. Potential benefits. With the nitrogen sensitive area mandatory upgrade under Title V, we would see localized improvements and potential estuary and abatement area improvements. The watershed permitting approach can be tailored to the entire community, allowing for greater potential for overall nitrogen load reduction, leading to broader watershed improvement. And that approach can address more than nitrogen. For example, the watershed permitting approach can be used to reduce phosphorus, which is known to cause eutrophication in freshwater bodies, such as freshwater ponds, and excessive algal growth in those areas. Last, who bears the burden? For the mandatory Title V upgrade, the burden is borne by the individual septic system owners, and the municipality must approve all upgrades and provide for enforcement with DEP assistance if needed. In contrast, the watershed permitting regulations spread the burden throughout the community as that community decides to do on its own. It may lead to community-wide tax or rate increases. Okay, with that, that's the last page of the table. And now I'm going to turn the PowerPoint presentation over to Maria Pinot, who's going to provide some information on funding sources. Maria?
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon. I'm Maria Pinot. I'm the Director of the Division of Municipal Services at Mass DEP, and I oversee the State Revolving Fund program. Today, I will provide a very brief overview of financing options through the State Revolving Fund program, and I will start with the Community Management Loan Program. This model has been very successful in meeting the needs of communities and could be used to finance the new Title V systems if the proposed regulatory revisions are promulgated. The SRF program has been financing replacements or repairs of failed septic systems at participating communities across the Commonwealth for many decades. The SRF program dedicates on an annual basis $5 million to offer 2% interest loans to communities to fund their septic loan programs. Over the past 5 years, the SRF program has issued 29 loans, totaling over $14 million at an average loan amount to a community of $450,000. This is how the Barnstable County operates their loan program, which now operates as its own revolving fund, offering loans to communities across Cape Cod. Next slide, please. So how does this program work? Mass DEP accepts loans applications on a rolling basis throughout the years, and communities can apply for financing whenever there is demand from homeowners. Homeowners, in turn, apply to the town for financing, and the town draws the funds down as needed from the SRF loan. The loan to the community is secured with a general obligation pledge of the communities and receives the traditional debt authorization at the local level. The homeowner loans, in turn, is secured through a betterment agreement between the town and the community. And Mass DEP or the Clean Water Trust, who is our partner in implementing the SRF program, are not a party to this agreement. Next slide, please. Since these betterment agreements are governed by Massachusetts general law, who oversees the interest rates and how they can be charged. But the interest rates that are charged to the community by the community to the homeowner can be used to cover the cost to administer the expenses, and any funds that are left from that can be revolved into the fund to provide additional loans to homeowners. The draws made against the loan by the community operate under the trust interim loan program and accrue no interest and no fees. In most instances, the loan to the community is put into repayment loan within 2 years or sooner if all the funds have been drawn and if the community decides that they are finished with the program. Next slide, please. So in addition to the community septic loan program, the State Revolving Fund program offers low interest loans to cities and towns to finance water infrastructure projects that are necessary to comply with the Clean Water and the Safe Drinking Water Acts. As you probably might have heard, Massachusetts expects to receive additional funding from the federal government in the amount of $1.1 billion of infrastructure funds over a period of 5 years through 2026. To access this funding, participation in the State Revolving Fund program is necessary. These funds provide for added loan capacity, but more importantly, they also provide for added principal forgiveness for disadvantaged communities. The slide that you're looking at is an image of the application process for SRF. And I should note that the SRF program finances all planning projects. And this process is for the construction projects, which can be very costly. And because demand is a lot more significant than the capacity of the program, even with the infrastructure funding, only high priority projects are offered financing. The SRF program deadlines are established according to EPA grant commitments and are fairly fixed. However, MassDEP will make every effort to work with borrowers to meet their project's needs. The application process begins with the annual project solicitations that begins at the start of the summer in early July and runs through mid-August of each year. When the solicitation period closes, MassDEP evaluates all construction proposals and ranks them based on pre-established criteria to list projects by priority ranking. Projects with a significant environmental benefit score high on the priority listing. And as I mentioned, because the demand for funds exceeds program capacity, only the priority projects that are listed on the intended use plan are offered financing. The final intended use plan is published at the beginning of the IUP year. And once a project appears in the intended use plans, the borrowers may submit a loan application together with plans and specifications. Loan commitments are generally issued by the end of the IUP year. I would like to mention a key deadline in this process, which is the June 30th deadline for local appropriation at town meeting, because without this authorization, an SRF loan is not possible. And once loan agreements are executed, bidding and construction may begin. The application process takes between 18 months to 2 years from project proposal submittal to securing financing and to start construction. As this indicates that readiness to proceed is central in participating in the SRF, and proactive planning is a must. With this, I conclude my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria. So as you're all aware, we are having public info sessions, having one right now as listed, and we will be having another tomorrow at noontime, which will be the same presentation in this same Zoom webinar format. As Tim mentioned at the outset of this info session, there are public hearings scheduled, and the public comment period is open for these draft regulations and draft revisions. That schedule is posted. We have 3 different public hearing sessions, one on November 30th at 6 p.m. in our DEP Southeast Regional Lakeville office. That is a hybrid meeting, can be in person and online. December 1st, which is a 1 p.m. Zoom meeting, not a hybrid, all online. And then December 5th at 6 p.m. at the Barnstable Town Hall, and that will also be a hybrid meeting and for in-person and online attendance. Information for these public hearing sessions, links to the actual draft regulation language, and other information that we're posting, including the recording of this information session, can all be found by going to mass.gov. The public hearings for that schedule and to register for those sessions, if you are planning to participate online, you can go to the public hearings page on mass.gov. And for other information, you can go to the Title V regulatory page. So you can put in Title V or 310 CMR 15.000, and that will get you to a list of the financial resources that Maria was speaking to and more. and details and the regulatory revisions themselves. If you have questions, you are welcome to contact the staff in the Southeast Regional Office that are listed here. For a question specific to your town situation, it's good to contact our folks in Lakeville. If you have questions pertaining to public hearing sessions or the draft regulations or how to submit public comment on these revisions, you can contact me, marybeth.chubb@mass.gov, or any of the folks listed in the Boston office. And as Maria Pinode mentioned, please contact her for any questions concerning the SRF funding resources that she reviewed. And that concludes our formal presentation.
If you're interested in looking at this policy.
Well, that was a lot. That was a lot. Sherry, you still there?
I am still here. Well, I think I'm back to a regular screen, not sharing anymore. Yeah, there was a lot. So if I will send the link to that, and that wasn't updated information. There are 2 more meetings that will be held in January, the public hearings that you can attend. I'll send I'll just list these out and put those links there too. You have to register for it, but you can go online and you can, make your comments heard. So, yeah, that's a lot of information. It's nice to hear that there's some money. Omar, do you have anything to add? I know they spoke specifically to the boards of health.
I do. I can tell you, well, I don't have to tell you all, this is a project of great magnitude. And, when I first heard about it, I kind of felt, in all honesty, I felt the weight on me. I was like, wow, how am I going to get through this? And one of the first things, I concluded 2 things, basically. One, that I won't be able to handle this by myself. And I know that I don't have to at this point. And the second thing that I concluded was that more than likely, the town of West Tisbury would need to apply for the watershed permit and be allowed, 20 years to get this thing together. One of my first thoughts was to maybe employ an environmental consultant, but I have since spoken with Adam, who assured me that, I would have enough support, here on the Vineyard, with the commission and all, to assist me in that, getting an environmental consultant, independent, to help may not be unnecessary. And that's kind of like where I'm at right now. I concluded those 2 things, that I will rely on the support that I can get, here from the island, and that we will need a long-term plan. That's where West Tisbury is at this point.
Yeah, I went to several of the meetings while they were figuring out what they were going to do. And these rules and regulations are really directed at the Cape. The Cape is under consent. There wasn't a whole lot done. And they then had to go back into court and said to DEP, what are you doing? And DEP so the first thing we needed to do was to separate ourselves from the Cape. And I think we did. Our stuff is not mandatory. The second conversation we had is we don't have 208 plans. We don't have watershed plans. We don't have the things Omar talked about. And that's how that money that we're spending now doing the Up Island, watershed management plans came from. And if you look at the scope of work, Omar, it's basically to provide you with a watershed management plan. Now, there will have to be some negotiations with your town, and they have to pick how they want to deal with everything and what the policy implications are. But in terms of, doing, first of all, the background basics, which is opening up the MVP and updating that, and then adding the technology, which we're doing, which that problem or that project will be done by the end of the year, where we look at all the different technologies and how much do they take out, what are their costs, all those metrics. And then we'll match up the metrics to how you could possibly meet your nitrogen goals with all of with the existing conditions and the possible solutions. We also, that's why ARPA is really important too for you, Omar, is to on your town to begin to prove some of these technologies. It's in a way, Richard, I'm looking at you. 5 years ago, we didn't have any tools. We didn't really, other than sewer. And if you look at what Maria Pinota is talking about, most of that's sewer. We added IA systems in there. So towns like West Tisbury could get several $1 million grants, and you could finance hundreds of these things and try to. We have IA systems now that work. I talked to John Smith today, and his stuff is coming in at below sewer, 2.1. So we have a PRB that's on the other side of it is 0. So there are things we're going to have that we could do, to meet all of our goals. And finally, so we're going to meet with. Omar and I talked. I've talked to most of the towns now. We're going to have to finish these projects and get watershed plans together. But DEP knew that, and that's why if you look at our scope of work, it's what they came up with the scope of work so that we would have watershed plans and be able to meet these requirements, which they knew. My final thing is, Brian Howes is going to be a huge loss. I'm just telling you that there isn't another person that had as much knowledge. He did the MEPs. He knew all the regulatory people. He was involved in every large scale, nitrogen management, pond management, watershed management project there was. And we were lucky that he was involved with ours. So we're going to have to develop, so Omar, I'm going to ask you, we're really going to have to develop our own, sort of restructure and develop some of our own resources.
Yeah.
He was very involved in this project because DEP wanted him involved in this project. And, it was pretty shocking to me. I'm still sort of trying to process it, but we have all the tools. I guess I'll leave you with that. We have tools. It could look daunting. These rules are coming. You got 5 years, but the tools are all there. There's a ton of money. So if these plans are implemented, we should be able to find the money. I mean, Mashpee is looking for 60 million. We're looking for 2 or 3. We should be able to do it. And we're just going to have to work together in the next year to do it. But I'm no doubt we have all the tools. It's not like man, what do we do? And we're just sitting there in, a hole. That's not, at least my view, that's not the situation. And we've been working, hard for the last year to get this stuff ready to go. So, Richard, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I appreciate your optimism. Let's hope you're right.
I hope.
Richard, do you mind if Rachel gives an update on what we've been doing for the Up Island 208s? Rachel, are you still with us? You're still
Sure.
there?
That'd be great.
Sorry, Rachel, didn't mean to put you on the spot, but.
Oh, yep. Yes, we, as on my other screen, I'm looking at the solutions that we're evaluating, the metrics that we're including in those. I just counted, they're like on our medium-sized list. Sherry and I cut the list down over the past couple of days from like 75 to 43 different options that are out there for solutions. The 43 are not necessarily appropriate for us, but we're going to be working on narrowing that down so it's manageable. As Adam said, we hope to have, we will have by the end of the year, a draft of the solutions and a good sense of what those solutions might be, how much nitrogen they will take out or manage, and how much that is likely to cost, so that at the very least we can put that on a continuum so that we can see and start to evaluate which solutions are best and get a ballpark of how much it might be for each watershed. So that's kind of where we're at. The existing conditions reports are pretty much complete. We have a few more reviews to do before we can say they're 100% done. But that's like the first big chunk of work. So, you know, I think we're in really good shape as far as moving forward with watershed permits. Happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Anybody have any questions?
I was interested to hear in the recording that Tim Jones referred to phosphorus. The fact that it's clearly got known consequences. I was wondering, is there anything that anyone knows about that has been actually developed in terms of implementing solutions to mitigate phosphorus? I mean, I'm aware of John Smith's work, but with respect to these proposed regulatory changes, do you know if, for example, any of the Cape Cod towns are looking into mitigating phosphorus and incorporating it into any of their plans, and whether that's something that we might emulate?
Let me just jump in. On the solution matrix that we're putting together, we will include phosphorus numbers. So with every solution, it will indicate the kilograms of nitrogen that are managed, as well as the kilograms of phosphorus. So we'll be able to check on that as well.
Anybody else have any questions? Not seeing anybody. Okay.
I have a general question.
Yeah.
About the backstory that's led up to this set of proposed changes and to our witnessing this presentation today. And that is there, has there been any discussion? I mean, I gather there was a lawsuit at Cape Cod, but has there been any discussion about the role of Title V in creating the conditions that the proposed new regulations seek to address?
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I certainly didn't raise it, although we have been very vocal about the fact that we thought Title V was, I mean, inaccurate. I mean, they act like somehow if you install, again, Omar knows it better than me, if you install a Title V system, it comes out at 26.6. And I remember George Hoyfelder said, if you can find any water like that, he would drink it. The fact is, these things come out at 70, 60, you know, as gray water, and the leaching field actually is it, you know, but again, and they haven't really done a whole lot with nitrogen anyway. It isn't like they have been all over this, DEP. They got into it because they were part of a lawsuit. But it's been 50 years since they did it. And the technology has changed, although Title V technology has got to be the slowest that I've seen. It still operates fairly consistently the way it always did. I think the difference is that they recognize that there is, for small communities, you're not going to sewer, that there are technologies that will take out nitrogen and hopefully phosphorus, and that they need to finance that stuff the same way that they do with the revolving fund, financing, you know, sewer. When we did our thing, you know, I always thought that the way out with this, we invited a guy from Kohler who had developed a nitrogen reducing system in India as part of the Gates Foundation. They got money to go to India and create a system that took no energy and got rid of all pathogens. And they did it, you know, because India has no septic tanks or no sewer. And they found with that grant that it also took out nitrogen. I'm not sure about phosphorus. I thought it was always going to come from them. And we had them here in 2018. because they could produce a standardized system that everybody would get. It's Kohler. But in the time, John Smith and others, have really managed to really create an alternative that we could use that could be put in most of the houses in these towns, the smaller towns. We have PRBs for places that aren't being with wildlife and other kinds of things that aren't septic tank related. Looking at pond openings and other kinds of stuff. So that's a long-winded answer. The answer is no. I mean, they've heard from us that we always thought that the Title V regulations were BS, that nobody was at 26.6. But DEP is, they're a difficult body, in a lot of cases. They operate behind, they're not in front, they're wagging the tail. I guess that's my politically correct way to answer it. But we have great health agents. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is coming out of Mora Valley, Omar Johnson, Matt Poole. I mean, they deal with it. So in terms of saying, how do we do better? They look at us now from the Cape. How do we do it? And we need to continue that.
Well said, Adam. Well said.
I am putting together an email that's to the link of what we just watched, and also to the link that you can register for the public hearings. And I will send that out to all of Water Alliance.
Okay.
And also, I see the reporter for one of the newspapers. Research what Brian Howes did. I mean, that Brian Howes is a significant party to water quality in this part of New England.
Yep, be good to let everybody know about that. For sure. Well, all right. Is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up regarding their own particular organizations? Don't have any ice. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead,
just have
John.
one last quick question or observation about the PowerPoint that we just saw. There are various slides that use words like alternative, and one, I think, that referred to non-conventional methods. Do they have a set of definitions of what constitutes alternative and what constitutes non-conventional methods? I presumably that must be made explicit somewhere. And I'm just throwing that out.
The 208 for Cape Cod Commission, which we're using a lot of their definitions for the different alternatives, had a breakdown of what everything is, and that will be part of the 208. So when we get that up and running, we will send that along also. I think they're willing to let us try many different alternatives. We just have to have, if a plan B, plan C, that if these alternatives don't work, then we have to go to more stringent methods.
Yeah, it'd be good to avoid dumping $50,000 into the ground and then finding out that you have to replace it with something else.
And we're lucky we have the resource of Kevin, who presented at Water Alliance last month, the testing center that, we've got a good place to start. They've got a lot of systems they've already tried, and we can go from there.
Yeah, for sure.
We also hope that all these programs could put capacity at the tribal lab. And some of the things, we send a lot of this stuff off island.
Yeah.
But some of it really doesn't need to be, as we're testing hypotheses and looking at strategic goals. They could stay on island, and we're hoping that the scale of, economies of scale elevates all boats, including the tribe. And I believe Tisbury has a lab too. Hoping that some of those, we've got to test this stuff anyway. So to answer your question, John, you could do, I wouldn't be so hung up on the definition of innovative, or the key is, what is it testing at? And can it be replicated, and is it real? And we have to test for all those kinds of things. And as long as our testing is, that they accept, then I think we'll be all right with it.
All right, does anybody have anything else you want to bring up, discuss while we all sitting here with each other?
Happy holidays.
That's right. Next week. Geez, time flies.
It does.
Be April before we know it.
I hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Adam, I'll be in touch with you soon.
Okay, yeah, I have a meeting. We have a meeting with DEP on Thursday next week. And I'll be in touch with you right after that.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Sherry, do you have anything else?
I don't think so. Our next meeting will be January 19th,
January 19th.
2023.
Whew. January 19th.
That is frightening.
Holy smokes. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Happy holidays. Stay
Yeah, happy
warm.
holidays, everybody.
Stay dry. Stay
Happy
healthy.
holidays, everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.